kid from the bush who grew into a legend in his own lunchtime, former SAS soldier Michael J. Malone has seen it all. This is Never Die Wondering, Mick Malone in his own words, hosted by the man himself, Mick Malone, along with Toby Malone, as they examine this long, storied career in the Australian Special Forces. Join us each week for behind-the-scenes insight, exclusive readings, and brutally honest truths from a true original. Welcome to Never Die Wondering. Welcome to episode 14 of Never Die Wondering, Mick Malone in his own words, a podcast that explores the life and legend of Michael John Malone, OAM. My name is Toby Malone, Mick's son and co-host of this podcast series, joined by the man whose name is in the title, Mick Malone. Hi, Dad.
G'day, mate. How are you?
I'm good. I'm enjoying this journey.
Had a good week, have you?
Yeah. Keeping busy. Always keeping busy and
How
enjoying.
my favourite children.
Well, you can't ask every week.
But you got to. You're in Canada. I'm in bloody Perth.
That is true. But I'm enjoying this opportunity of reliving this book. So I was fairly heavily involved with the book, getting it written, or at least sort of sitting on top of you, making you write it, with great resistance as we went.
So cruel.
But knocking into shape. And the biggest trouble that I'm having as we go is that I keep seeing my mistakes. I keep seeing things thinking, oh, I should fix that. Oh, that's not. But they're only minor. Yeah, they're only minor, and I don't think anyone would see them except for me.
You used to pull top in one of the chapters, I remember.
But in the last episode we spent some time talking about the regiment, and so it's one of those interesting things when you're going through training and then you go onto the Aide Course, and then you go through the parachute course, you go through all of this sort of stuff, but then of course you arrive at the regiment, and then that's when life begins. It's not the training, it leads to something, but then you got to go on from there. And so there's certain kinds of things that you got to do to make sure that you're ready to go when your number comes up, go to the war. But also you got to continue training. So there's all these additional qualifications that you needed to get as you went along.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just because you were had the sandy beret on didn't mean that you were a full bottle yet. Is that right?
Yeah, well, the difference between the SAS boys and the regimental, well, the RAR boys, is that each patrol had to be fully qualified in everything.
Mm.
All had to be medics, all had to be signallers, all had to be weapons men, demolitions men, and so on. So, as I said later on, I think if anyone got the chop, patrol commander got the chop, anyone could take over.
Right.
And that's just the way SAS in England have put it together in day one.
Mm-hmm.
Paddy Mayne and all the boys.
That's right. So in this chapter, we're going to learn about how you got sorted out about how to look after a bloke medically in the field, which is something you probably had very little knowledge of.
Yeah, I knew Band-Aids.
So after Band-Aids, you were lost.
Yeah.
Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about that process of getting into that, and you had to travel across the country for a lot of these training sessions.
Mostly.
Yeah. So we'll get into it, and we'll just read about. This is a shorter chapter, so not much time of reading, but we'll have plenty to talk about. So today we'll be reading chapter 11 of Two Ranks on the Road: 35 Years of Australian Special Forces Service by Michael J. Malone, OAM, published in 2024 by Imprimatur Books, Perth. This chapter, entitled Medical Aide Course, covers pages 87 to 91 in the print edition. The ebook may have slightly different numbering, so follow from the beginning of the chapter. As we read, the body of the text will be read by author Mick Malone. Whenever we come across a footnote, we will pause in the least disruptive way possible, and I will read the footnote. And now, without further ado, Two Ranks on the Road.
Chapter 11, Medical Aide Course, 1968. To keep a mate alive. Next up, we had to look forward to the SAS Medical Aide Course at Healesville, Victoria. Some of the first tour blokes were there, such as Jock Lorimer, Ross McCallum, Freddie Roberts, Bubbles Merton, Blue Orc Stewart.
Footnote: Blue joined us in Vietnam as a Rio to 2 Squadron October 1968 and stayed on with us until May 1969 when he burnt out and became a Garbo for 30 years in Sydney. He was also known as the Scourge of Southeast Asia.
Oh, Blue. Oh, God. Peter By, Bill Nagel, and an older company bloke, Stan Lavery. On the first morning, the chief instructor called the roll. When he got to Stan Lavery, he called out, "Private lavatory?" And Stan immediately leapt to his feet and said, "I'm not putting up with this shit," and stormed out of the room. The instructor was gobsmacked, as we all were. Stan was outside the door having a cigarette and a laugh. The instructor had lost us on day one. Many of us younger blokes were thrilled to be on the course with these legends. Also turning out were Alan Ingram, Joe Rice, Munga Bill Irwin, Rick Turnbull, Johnny Davies, Ian Moore,
Footnote: Ian later fell victim to cancer in the 70s. RIP.
Oscar Bilbra, Dave, Nature Boy Jones, Kev, Doc Logan, Macca McCormack, Bubbles Gibson, among others. What a mob. This was going to be a fun course. The School of Army Health was located in an old World War II barracks made of wood with tin roofs in the small country Victoria town of Healesville. Never got into town much except to sink a few pints at the local pub. There were a couple of courses running parallel to ours, um, and one was a nurses training course. There were some stunners amongst them, and we got to meet them in the canteen at night. Some blokes were very lucky with the girls. Me, not so much. The tearaways would arrive back in our lines looking very bedraggled at around first light, just enough time to get showered and dressed and get to breakfast. There was a lot of sniggering throughout the day, but they generally kept their conquests to themselves. Classroom work was pretty boring, but we learned a lot. Anatomy and physiology was the main part, and it would prove very useful. One of our blokes, Kev Logan, was a medic by trade, AAMC, uh, would go to work in the RAP when we got home and was our squadron medic in 69. The course concentrated on what was known as remote locality medicine, or what you needed and methods used when you were miles from anywhere and had to keep a mate alive. First aid, emergency tracheotomy, bandaging, stopping the flow of blood, that sort of thing. We even practiced giving injections into oranges. Mercurochrome and Spurson powder were the favoured treatments for any kind of skin wound. We were examined on other practical aspects such as bandaging a broken leg or arm, making slings, making bush crutches, which left a bit to be desired. All in all, it was satisfactory work and we all passed. Presentation of certificates was very satisfying, and before we knew it, it was time to pack our bongos and head for the railway station. Me and a couple of others parted company with the rest of them and headed for Sydney. We found the Transport Office in Spencer Street Station, where they issued our warrants and tickets for train leaving in a couple of hours, just enough time for the odd gargle or two. The trip north was uneventful, and I got out at Liverpool, greeted by Mick, my brother-in-law. Very kind of him. It was great to be back in New South Wales, the state of my birth and first 19 years. He dropped me off at Mum's in St Mary's and kept going. Um, he had a wife and newborn to worry about. Mum and Dad were both very pleased to see me. They wanted to know everything about our training, especially the medical course. I noticed he'd filled the fridge with Reese's cans, so that was a good thing. Mum was quite teary to see me, which was a mother's lot in life. Dad still had a bee in his bonnet over Menzies' war, as he refused to, as he referred to the Vietnam situation. He was very disappointed that I would be going on active service.
Footnote: He knew a bit about active service. Dad had quite a tumultuous war, wounded in Libya with shrapnel at Alamein, and again in New Guinea, shot through the shoulder in the Battle of Ley.
Yeah. But luckily, he kept most of this stuff to himself, lest it ruined our holidays. We both knew I wasn't going to take a backward step. He was in his late 40s and could probably still go a round or two, but I was 20 and full of piss and bad manners. I made it clear I wasn't going to take any of his socialist claptrap without actually saying it. He got my drift through body language and Mum's knitted brow. Christmas came and went without rancour and the usual socks and jocks. I was able to catch up with a few mates, a few people after Christmas, the Carmichaels, the McNaughts next door, Terry and Barb Donovan, Raff across the street, and Frank Ryan, Mick's father, who took me down to the Wagon Wheel Hotel for a few schooners. Frank was a great bloke and a very funny man. None of the scaly mates of my youth could be found. It appears they'd flown the coop or were in jail. My new brother-in-law, Mick Ryan, would buy and sell the lot of them. Didn't matter to me. I had a new set of mates in the West. It was time to dust off the bellet and prepare for long drive to Perth. This was a great little car, very reliable, and would handle the long haul well. I took it up to the garage on the highway that both Dad and Mick used for their car maintenance. My car was still relatively new, and it had been on blocks for over 6 months. So the tyres were as new, got a full service, grease and oil change and so on. I was ready to go and planned to be underway in 5 days. I had to be back in Swanbourne by the end of January, so it was out with the maps with a route recce. Dad suggested I go via Broken Hill, but I was determined to see the lush, late summer greenery of southern New South Wales and Victoria before I struck the arid regions of South Australia. I bought a 5 gallon jerry can at disposals in Penrith, along with an oil can, tow ropes, jumper leads, and other bits and pieces. While in Penrith, I caught up with Adrian Gordon and her family. Her brother Brian wasn't long back from Vietnam himself. A little bit of inter-unit kayaking ensued, but nothing serious. I wasn't going to argue with a 9 mile sniper, as we called artillery. Adrian and I were sort of betrothed, but still unsullied. A bit of canoodling with her, and I was away back home for dinner and early night. Next day, I was up early to make sure I caught Dad before he headed off to work. We hugged each other, not a natural occurrence in our house. Mum was different. She hugged and kissed me all the way out to the car, making sure I had everything. When Dad drove off, Mum slipped me $100 to help with petrol. She was always the most generous person to us kids. I drove off down Thompson Avenue, waving to Christy as I went past. I decided I'd go out the Great Western Highway and head southwest, and I needed to make it to Hay for the first day and hoochie up there in a motel. It was quite a long haul to Hay, and I must say I often stopped for grease-ups. My car radio was next to useless out in those parts, and it was a quite solitary dive. It slept like a log at Hay and was away at Sparrows down through southern New South Wales and into South Australia at Renmark, trying to avoid Adelaide if I could. Saw a sign pointing to Port Augusta, and thought, that's for me. In Port Augusta, I picked up the Sejuna sign, and before I knew it, I was on the Nullarbor. Slept in the car at one of the few and far between garages, which closed till 6 a.m. When it opened, I filled up with both the car and my stomach. Not sure where the dirt road started, but it was a rough and corrugated piece of torture and slowed me down considerably. At one stage, I saw a huge plume of dust in the distance, and before I knew it, I realised it was a huge road train driving towards me, right down the middle of the road. Shits were trumps as I scrambled to get off the road and 50 metres into the bush. They roared past me with their horns blaring as if So fuck off, you. We're bigger than you and we own the road.
Footnote. This happened again when Joe and I and the dog were wandering across the Nullarbor in the combi. Seeing two large trucks bearing down on us gave me a feeling of deja vu all over again.
Uh, it took a while for the dust to settle, but when I rejoined the road, I passed many a semi, but thankfully all sticking to their side of the road. At the WA border, it was a new bitumen road and pure luxury after the dirt road. It took me a day to get to Baladonia for more fuel and then on to Cal. Didn't linger long in that town. I was starting to get itchy to see my mates at Swanee. As I had done no physical work on leave, that first week back was going to hurt. The guard on the gate was a new guy off a carter and two behind me. In those days, SASR was running back-to-back carters to build up stock of 3 Squadron, which was the next cab off the rank for Vietnam. As it were, most of the Borneo vets and first tour vets had pulled the pin and been posted elsewhere. It would now be up to us to rebuild 3 Squadron into a competent fighting force. We had 12 months to get our shit in one sock. End of chapter.
And that was chapter 11 from Two Ranks on the Road 35 Years of Australian Special Forces Service by Michael J. Malone, as read by the author. So, building up a career, getting yourself all sorted and becoming more and more detached from New South Wales with every
Yeah,
time you leave and come back again.
yeah. I had no reason to go back there. My mother is one reason, my father, my sister, but that was it. I didn't have the mates that I had in the West.
Mm.
The mates I had weren't mates anymore. They were just people I used to know.
Yeah, and back then it's harder to keep in touch with people than it is now when you can be a long way from
Yeah.
people and still be in touch.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. At the end of the day, I'm just so thrilled to have the mates I've got.
Yeah, yeah. Well, when your new life
And
is
my
in a new
fabulous
place.
family.
Yeah. Yeah, and when you're talking about going back to WA and everyone who is back there is on the same page as you and are on the same, no one at Campbell Barracks is giving you any stick about Menzies War. Um,
No, no.
you're not having to worry about any of that or having to explain to people that it's a big deal that you've got these parachute wings on your battle dress or everyone understands.
Yeah,
And
no,
it
that's
mu
right.
yeah.
We're all on the same page. That's exactly right.
And it must have been an interesting thing to be learning at the knee of some of these legends, doing the Med Aide course with people who.
Mate, when they spoke, you just needed to drop everything and listen. Especially the people like Clem Dwyer and Des Kennedy. Des Kennedy was an MM
Hmm.
from Malaya. Um, and he was old compared to us. We were only 20. Des looked about 48, and that
Right.
was old those days. Nowadays it's not. But when they spoke about anything to do with the bush, you kept your ears open, hoping something could fall in.
Yeah.
But we had a fantastic bunch of people in that unit. And I tell you what, we're very lucky.
Yeah. And then later on, you would really take very seriously the mentorship ideal when you after you were back and with the young blokes and as when
Yeah.
you were at Duntroon and then when you came back to B2IC, the training squadron, you that mentorship part became a major element.
The Duntroon experience was probably the best I had in that I was there with a bunch of warrant officers from other units who were standover merchants, yelling and carrying on all the time. I didn't do any of that. Walked around with my beret on and just listened to people and talked about stuff, showed them how to put their webbing together, how to keep their bed, how to make their bed, for God's sake.
Mm.
All these things that I learned at boarding school. A lot of the other blokes didn't bother doing any of that.
Mm.
They were too busy down the sergeant's mess pouring grog down their throats. So I've still got a lot of blokes who consider me a close mate now who were done through cadets.
Yeah. And a lot of
Uh,
them went on to be the highest ranking
oh, one went
figures.
on to be the Chief of Army, the Chief of the Defence Force,
Right.
Angus Campbell.
Yeah. And he played in your
Uh,
in your fourth grade
yeah, he was the
rugby team.
captain of my fourth grade rugby team. And his brother, Richard, who I never served with, but he served in SAS also. He was a full colonel at the end of his army career, and I think he might be still serving now.
Hmm.
I think at the Australian Embassy in Ankara.
Right.
Then Rick Burr, of course, was Chief of Army. He was one of my cadets who quizzed me about everything to do with SAS while we're on a checkpoint in the mountains. He had a broken leg and couldn't do much, so he sat on a checkpoint with me, and I just talked the whole time about what SAS soldiering was all about.
Hmm.
And then Mark Smethurst, of course, whose father was a CO of the regiment,
Yeah.
Neville Smethurst. Mark rose to be a brigadier. He was a lout. He was probably the best cadet in the college in the bush.
Hmm.
Um, and I still keep in sort of semi-contact with him. And Mark Xavier, the X-Man. He was a good young cadet who's now some sort of head serang of some big corporations in New South Wales.
And all of this
And
came from what you learned at the knee of the blokes who came before you. Yeah,
yeah,
that the value of being a mentor and what a mentee can get. Because I'm sure some of those lessons you learned from these blokes while in 1967, 68, you used in the bush.
absolutely.
Yeah. And yeah,
Tim
and
Ryan, Tim Ryan was one of my cadets at Duntroon, and you met him, didn't you, Tim
yeah,
Ryan?
yeah.
He now heads up a big corporation in London,
Hmm.
um, and he was he, he was a wild man.
Right.
I wish he had come to the regiment, but he never did.
Mm.
He decided to be an armoured corps waller or a treadhead, as they used to call them.
Right.
Um,
So yeah.
but sorry.
So yeah, no, just a short chapter and plenty of stuff going on, learning about the medical stuff. And did you ever have occasion to use any of the medical skills out in the bush?
Oh yeah. Mercurochrome and Spurson powder were the two favourite ones.
Yeah.
Any scratch or cut or whatever you use mercurochrome, and now it's banned, of course, which is mercury.
Right. But you
But
didn't have
in
to.
New Guinea, we'd go into a village in New Guinea with a big bag of aspirin and hand them out to the kids.
Yeah.
They'd all stuff them down their throats, and we'd say, "Oh, good medicine, good medicine," and thank you, John. Thank you, John. Everyone was John, of course. We're all John. No, New Guinea. How far the next village? He go, he go, he go, he go, he stop.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into the New Guinea chapter in a couple of
Yeah,
weeks.
that was,
That's
it
a
was
good
so
one.
much fun.
But that is all the time we have this week for Never Die Wondering. So join us next week for the next installment of our exploration of Mick Malone's career as we get into the 12th chapter of the book entitled Assault Pioneer Demolition. If you have a copy of Two Ranks, read along with us. I've been Toby Malone, and thank you to Mick Malone for medically joining me on this journey.
My pleasure, son.
This has been Never Die Wondering, Mick Malone in his own words. For links to purchase your own copies of Mick's books, visit the show notes or mickmalone.com.au. This podcast is produced by Toby Malone, Joe Malone and Mick Malone, and engineered by Toby Malone. Theme music is The Happy Wanderer, the official SAS march, as reimagined by Cormac Malone and Meg Logue Malone. Yes, this is a family affair. This is a GM production in association with Imprimatur Books.